I don't think either. I read Paul's piece, Meyerberg's piece, saying it would quell, and then people attacked him, so who knows. I think no matter what the format is of any event, there will always be people who would like to have something different. But I know my bosses are really happy with what we have. Having said that, they're going to continue to talk about ways to make it better, just like the managers of the newspapers do to try to make their company better. Nothing's imminent, but they'll be talking.
From that standpoint, I mean, you really haven't had the perfect storm. That when you look back at some of the times during the BCS era, you haven't had that like 4 or 5 to 6% people being stubbed, a lot of public debate in the CFP era. Have you, Bill?
No, not a lot. I mean, that goes in degrees. We had a little the first year. Hancock said, rolling his eyes. But every year is going to be different, and there will always be a Team 5. There will always be a team disappointed by its seeding. That goes with the territory. In the 16 years I've spent with the Final Four with the NCAA tournament, the same thing existed there. It exists in NCAA volleyball and soccer and every sport.
Well, what was your perspective from within the room about how difficult it was between 1 and 2?
Very difficult. And as what Rob said was right. They spent more time on that than anything else this weekend, and came back to it this morning. There were people on both sides of the issue, but at the end of the day, they felt confident that they had it right. And just the fact that there were, of the 6 weeks, each one was number 1 3 times, is enough indication of how close they were.
Right, because it's not just let's finally talk about that today. You guys have been talking about that for weeks, and I'm sure that's fluctuated a ton.
Every week. And then what happens is every team's resume changes every week. And so Ohio State beats Michigan, resume changes. LSU does what they did this week, resume changes. And they look always at the full resume, and because they can't just base it on one game, but everybody's resume changes every week.
Were there any votes this weekend on the 1 versus 2 question?
Yeah, there were a couple.
A couple revotes?
Yeah.
Was this the most difficult 1-2 discussion, and also was it the most clear-cut 1 through 4 discussion that you've been a part of?
It was. Your mind tends to wash out the past, but they spend as much time on this 1 and 2 as on anything I can remember in the past. Difficult. Who's to define difficult? But 1 through 4 was obviously clear cut, and Oklahoma, Georgia did get discussed, but it was, as Rob said, it was a matter of trying to do due diligence. And if you remember the voting process, 4, 5, 6 are discussed together in round 2 in the votes every year. So.
During the Big 12 championship game, as you're all watching it, I mean, was there any talk about? I mean, are you guys talking among yourselves about what's going to happen if Baylor wins this game? Or do you save those discussions for the actual committee?
We really, I don't know how to say this without sounding sophomoric, but it's the coolest thing to be able to watch football with these football experts every all day, every Saturday. I will treasure that opportunity, and but they're not. As Rob said, they're whoa, and they're, oh my goodness, did you see that? And look on that TV. Hope they show it again, because there's 4 TVs, and for a time we have 3 games on. But they don't talk about it in terms of what are we going to do if Wisconsin goes ahead and wins. They just don't. It's like, wow, well, let's see what happens in the second half. And the same thing with the first half of the Big 12 game. They just enjoy watching ball, but they know they're accustomed to not projecting week to week, and so likewise they don't project half to half.
I'm curious, you're talking about that. What was Joe C. like yesterday morning as OU's playing?
Joe had a seat. That we have 4 rooms. One of them's a meeting room, and then 3 other rooms where there's TVs. And Joe was in the outer TV room along with probably 3 others. I sat with him for a while, and Andrea sat there for a while, and Scott Strickland for a while. Joe he's just a very stoic watching the games. Joe's not an emotional person during games, and he wasn't there, but very focused.
Bill, every year is different, and every group of teams is different. This year, you had 3 teams that were just dominant, and I'm curious what it was like for you to see over the course of this process, see what matters most to the committee when you're comparing 3 similar dominant teams.
Yeah, it was fascinating this year because those 3 obviously were near the top every week, and we had the matter of Clemson's not being able to play the same caliber teams during the season as the other 2. And we like when top teams play each other because it helps us to evaluate the teams.
Sure.
And with Ohio State and LSU, it was just, as I said, just back and forth based on the changes in the resume. I think we all knew that we were looking at 3 elite teams from really the time, basically from the time we started meeting this.
Yeah.
Take us back to the old BCS days. How much of a nightmare would this sort of situation have been back then? Especially with the defending national champion. Yeah, national champion.
Oh yeah, it would have been very difficult. I don't want to use the term nightmare, but it would have been very difficult.
Flashback to
we
2004.
I was going to say we had it in 2004. That was the year before I joined. But yeah.
You've had 3 different chairmen, all have been athletic directors. In replacing Rob, do you follow that model, or could it be a former coach, or have you thought yet about that?
Haven't thought very much about it. That'll happen after the first of the year. I will say all 3 chairs have been terrific. Jeff was a great starter, and Kirby did a tremendous job, and Rob picked up the baton. No, we haven't really thought about it.
Bill, a couple of weeks ago, Bill, there was that attention on Rob and the position he was in with Oregon and the what if of that. How did you see him handle the Oregon problem throughout this process?
He handled it.
And the criticism that comes with that,
Yeah, he handled it with grace, just like the other ADs have. Radakovich had, Joe had, Gene had. And these people are pros. They have their jobs to do. They have their day jobs, and they take off their day job hat and put on their CFP hat. He handled it gracefully. But it was obviously, as you all know, it was the first time we ever had a chair with teams involved at the top end.
Well, if the Ducks win in Tempe, you would have had an Oregon-Oklahoma a real debate for that 4th spot.
A real debate. And it's so cool about college football. You can say if any game if this or this or this had happened. Georgia, South Carolina. Last year, Ohio, was it last year or 2 years ago, Ohio State, Oklahoma. Just there's always one game and sometimes one play that makes such a difference, and that's what makes our regular season so wonderful, because you have to pay attention.
What was your take on Gene Smith telling the student newspaper there that he left the committee because Ohio State did not make the top 4?
Yeah, I talked to Gene about it when he decided to leave the committee, and that was not a topic that was.
He didn't. That was news to you.
No. Yeah.
Were you a little surprised or disappointed? Or
no, Gene's a pro. And he didn't. He did it. He had the new coach that he didn't need to shepherd through, and then he got the NIL burden on top of that. So it's Gene's a helper and a supporter type person. I don't think he knew what was ahead of him in the NIL world.
Still doesn't.
Still doesn't.
Probably, yeah.
None of us do.
You were in the room the past few years when Jeff would talk about Oklahoma's defense, and Kirby a couple of times talked openly about their defense is really struggling. Compare that, contrast it to what Oklahoma has done this year in terms of the discussion in the room, and where hey, this team's defense is completely different. We now think of them differently.
Yeah, significant difference. Last year was historic offense, and a defense with 2 question marks behind it. And this year, it's a darn good offense and a darn good defense. So just a night and day difference in the tenor of the discussion about Oklahoma from this year and last year.
Yeah, can you give us any illustrations for that?
Noticing that how well Oklahoma's defense played really yesterday, and discussions about that last night and this morning. And every team's different from year to year.
Is there possibility, though, of maybe, I know what you're going to say, but I got to ask it anyway, is there buyer's remorse sometimes when you look at Oklahoma gets in the playoff with a defense that's not very good and they haven't won a game yet? Maybe this year you're thinking of them differently in those terms?
There's no buyer's remorse at all. Oklahoma deserved to be there last year, and they deserve the last 2 years, and they deserve to be there this year. Did I get that right? Was it last 2 years?
2 years.
Yeah.
And 3 out of 4,
Right.
4 out of 5, 4 out of 5.
There's a lot of traditionalists, I think, isn't there, on the committee? Defense wins championships, that old axiom, that kind of thing.
There's some, but there's also more people who look at the big picture. And so I wouldn't say teams with great defenses have advantage over great offensive teams in any particular sense. And really, Oklahoma last year is a great example of that. The term historic offense, you heard us say this last year, and it was used almost every meeting last year because that was a historic offense.
Right. So was the 1 year before, I guess.
It was. Yeah.
Bill, you're aware of like perception in the offseason. The whole offseason, people talk about another Alabama Clemson game, right? Was it exciting for you to see 2 programs rise up and kind of set this up to be kind of a killer playoff that maybe people didn't expect?
You know, every year we've been looking at teams and thinking, we might have a new team this year. And our perspective on that is we might have a new team that has to learn how to book transportation and lodging and hospitality. And
Just logistics. That's
just
all that matters. Yeah.
Logistics. And of course, I heard reporters saying, I don't want so and so to be in the playoff. Just like I hear reporters saying, I don't want the Pats to be in the Super Bowl. I don't want the Yankees to be in the World Series. We hear that. You just enjoy it like any sports fan would.
Bill, I feel like maybe we talked a little bit about this last year, but, sending LSU to Atlanta obviously makes a lot of sense geographically. I think Ohio State is closer to Atlanta as well than it is to Phoenix. Are there any at all input from the schools? Hey, someone had said, hey, we'd really like to play. If LSU had said, we'd really like to play in Phoenix.
Should there be?
And should there be?
We hear from schools who will say this is what would be the best thing for us. But we hear from several schools. But the fact is the protocol is really clear. It is that the number 1 seed goes to the most advantageous site, and period.
As determined by the committee?
As determined by the committee.
With input from the number 1 seed, though? Or maybe preferential input? Kind of thing?
You can tell.
Yeah.
Are they going to play a team from the region? If they're number 1, are they going to play a team from the region? Oh boy, that could be a disadvantage for them.
Last year, Alabama at Dallas.
Last year, Alabama, Dallas.
Like say,
A great example.
If Ohio State would have been the number 1, and say Clemson would have been the number 4.
Yeah, I don't know how we didn't get to that, so I don't know how that might have come out. But it's clearly most advantageous site for a number 1 seed as determined by the committee.
Bill, one thing that comes up each year out of that is, you have all 5 of the autonomy conferences playing championship games now, which didn't happen at the start of this. But you still have the unbalanced schedules. You have some conferences playing 8 conference games, others 9. And it comes up that the teams that play 8 haven't missed the playoff, and the teams that play 9 have missed the playoff. Would you like to see something uniform on that?
You know what we have to deal with what we're given by the conferences, and so whether it would be easier for us or not is not something we can even consider, because it's up to the conferences. And the committee talks about 8 versus 9, and they talk about that's one that comes up a lot in the meetings.
Oh, it does come up.
It comes up. They deal with it, but what they're looking at is all 13 games, and it comes up in the context of, they had 4 non-conference games. Well, who did they play? Okay, they had 3. Who did they play? But sure, the committee's aware of that. Yeah, and then in FCS games, and the thing is, everybody knows how tricky scheduling is for schools. It's just tricky, and the committee has to deal with what they're given by the conferences.
Is that a deal where you guys playoff is like the jewel, and the conferences are like the crown? In other words, you can't really dictate what they do, nor should you, because they're the power in college.
Yeah,
football.
there are bosses. They run this, and we all work for them, and we all work for all 10 of them plus Notre Dame. So, yeah, this is their event.
Bill, just double checking. I think you gave this quote to Dennis Dodd, but my memory is pretty faulty on stuff like that. That this was when the expansion talk was in full swing, about a year ago. But I believe you were quoted saying that even if there was a decision to expand, it would be at least a 2 or 3 years process. Is that a correct estimate?
Yeah, he got close on that. What we were talking about was, don't quote me ripping Dennis. I wouldn't. He's my friend. I respect him. But what we were talking about was, how long was it from when the playoff was created until it started? And that was 2.5 years. So that might have kind of morphed into, it might be 2 or 3 years before. But we haven't gotten near to the point of talking about that.
It would be a complicated process, though, correct?
Yeah. All conferences and bowls would have to agree. And
Salaries will be impacted.
all parties to the contract would have to agree. The conference championship games are all scheduled. I'd love to slide off the record, but I can't.
Slide away.
Yeah.
You mind if I slide just for a second?